we have 66 degrees. Your next news at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Get Down to Business with Shalom Klein, the show for business and jobs powered by Tandem HR. Heard Sunday evenings at 6.
They got the beat, the campus beat, the campus beat. Yeah, the campus beat.
Yeah, and we have a special guest for this installment of Campus Beat. He's a former Yale Law School professor and dean. But before we get to Professor Kronman, did you see this? The Bearded Ladies of Berkeley?
Okay, you did mention that the other day. Is it a singing group? A cappella?
It could be. You're right. That could be a name for an a cappella group. But no, it's female paleontologists, including some from Berkeley, wearing fake beards to highlight alleged gender bias in their field. There's gender bias in the field of studying fossils? Really?
I've never heard of it.
I mean, has that
sexual harassment in the fossil field?
how much attention does that field of study get, just generally speaking? It seems like more like trying to raise the profile of that field of study more than anything else.
So wait, as a female, did they actually grow a beard,
No.
or are they just putting on beards?
Oh no, although that's a great question.
Because some ladies can do it, but I can't.
And on college campuses these days, some ladies aren't ladies. The Bearded Lady Project tries to show that you don't have to be a man to love fieldwork and contribute to science. You know, this is sort of perpetuating a long-standing myth that women are somehow shut out of science and higher education.
And we're not.
For 30 years, the majority of BAs earned in the field of biology has been by women. For 30 years. And yet we're still playing this game about somehow women in science is regarded with skepticism. I mean, it just isn't. In fact, the only categories where women don't out-earn men in BAs and advanced degrees, the only fields of study?
Yeah.
Computer science and engineering. And thus the whole STEM push, which has been largely directed towards women. Meanwhile, across every other field of study, women are earning the majority, if not supermajority, of undergraduate and graduate degrees, and nobody seems to care about men falling behind or the gender bias in their direction. It's rather fascinating. Just another campus beat story that's a perfect setup to the culture on campuses. Michigan State, my sister's alma mater. Student employees had a mandatory sensitivity training this month. Hour-long inclusive and culturally sensitive service to residents and guest presentation, during which their language, their vocabulary was reprogrammed. For example, when a customer asks you for something and you say, no problem, that could be a trigger. As Michigan State Facilities Manager Sheena Balbach explained, I say this all the time, no problem. I never thought this could be a trigger word, but I'm saying no problem. That's leading a customer to believe that they could be a problem or they could be an inconvenience to you, and we're just assuring, and you're just ensuring them that they're not. Wait, am I a problem? Am I normally a problem? When you said no problem, do you mean I could be a problem? Could I be an inconvenience to you? Oh my God. Yeah. Also, I don't know, and you shouldn't. You should have done this. Were also examples of triggers. You have to remove those words from your lexicon, replace them with quote unquote calmers. Calmers. Yeah. For example, it's our policy. No. Trigger. The calmer.
Right.
Here's what we can do.
Oh, I see. Here's how I can help you, or here's what we should do in this situation.
Trigger. I apologize. Calmer. I am truly sorry. Much more heartfelt, sure. Trigger. I don't know. Calmer. I'll find out and get back to you. Much more solution oriented.
Oh,
Also, obviously, yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, no, sir. Yes, sir. No. No. I would like to start seeing a culture around Michigan State where we say they, not his or hers, even when it's grammatically incorrect, of course. In addition, asking for a customer's name is appropriate according to one of the slides
What?
in this Orwellian cultural sensitivity session. I mean, that's the whole right. Hey, when your waiter or waitress comes up, my name's is
Yeah, I say, hi, what's your name? I always ask what her or his name is.
I don't, because we're not developing a relationship. It's a business transaction.
Well,
Hey, you want to go out for drinks after, Joe?
no, I just think it's respectful if you ask their name, and then when you need something, say, excuse me, Lisa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Why is there so much ketchup on this? But
That's-
also, real quick, at New York University, they have a gender studies department, don't you know? And they published a paper, Dan, saying that milking cows is like sexual abuse. There's emotional trauma related to pregnancy and non-consensual hormone treatments. They said it's an outdated stereotype about women being caretakers and that it's sexual abuse if they milk cows.
It's sexual abuse if women milk cows, or
Yes,
if
if-
anybody milks a cow.
Women milk cows.
And then they're going to complain about gender bias in the dairy industry and start wearing beards. Okay.
I see what you did there.
For more on this general topic of campus life, including at some of the alleged leading lights of enlightenment, like Yale University, we're pleased to be joined by Anthony Kronman, Sterling professor at Yale Law School, specializing in contracts, bankruptcy, jurisprudence, social theory, and professional responsibility. He was the dean of Yale Law from 94 to 2004. His book, The Assault on American Excellence, which is already getting a lot of attention. Brett Stevens covered in the New York Times, and he also sat down for an interview with Inside Higher Education that we talked about last week. Professor Kronman, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So what prompted you to write this book and say things that are not consistent with the established orthodoxy on campuses like, say, Yale's?
I've been at Yale on the faculty now for 40 years. I'm a devoted teacher. I love my students, and I have felt for some time now that the tone, the culture, the character of the classroom and of the university in general, not just Yale, but schools like it across the country, has been moving in a direction which runs against the grain of my understanding of what higher education ought to be for, of what it's all about.
Just because you have such a long standing employment at Yale, you've been there for so long, can you pinpoint when you think the switch was flipped, or a period of time where you think it started to descend into the place we now find it?
Yeah. Well, if we go back a long ways, back to the 1960s, when I was an undergraduate myself, of course, there was a lot of student activism on campus and protests of all sorts. I was involved in them myself, but they were, for the most part, directed at righting wrongs off campus. The advancement of civil rights in the South, in particular, protests against the Vietnam War. Today's protests are directed at the inner life of our schools themselves and at correcting what are perceived to be their shortcomings, making them more egalitarian and democratic. And this big shift from an outward-looking student protest movement to an inward-looking one really began to accelerate, I would say, 6 or 8 years ago. And the atmosphere just in the last couple of years has become thicker and thicker and thicker. And, I've been disturbed by it and have complained about it quietly to a few of my colleagues and friends. And a couple of them said, look, if you're so upset about it, you should speak your mind and write a book. So I went upstairs to my study and my screen and sat down and composed it. And, there will be lots of people on campus and off who read the book who say, well, I'm glad someone finally said it. It needed saying. There are others, of course, who will say this is crazy. It's undemocratic. It's elitist.
Writing a book is
the point of what's going on.
Writing a book
you can
is
write the script, so that's all coming. And then I'm
Right.
hoping there will be some who say, well, some of the things he says make sense, others not, and we'll get a conversation going. That's what I really hope the book will do.
Did you
Get a conversation going?
right? And did you dive into the fact that what does it mean to make a student feel safe?
I talk about this in the book. I was listening to your conversation a couple of minutes ago, and here are my thoughts about it. In a classroom, sitting around the table, talking about whatever the subject happens to be. It could be economic theory, it could be the history of the Civil War, it could be ancient Greek. What the students and the teacher are attempting to do is figure out what's true and correct about the subject under discussion. And of course, everyone may have, who's in this conversation, may have strong feelings about it. They may feel that the truth lies here or there, but it never is enough just to say, well, this is how I feel about it, and therefore it must be true. That's a way of ending a conversation. It's not a way of continuing it. All of the developments that you were describing and giving some pretty gruesome examples of, these all elevate feelings to a level of prominence and prestige that they oughtn't to have in any shared inquiry into the truth in any subject, whatever the subject happens to be. So I'm all for politeness and respectfulness. My parents raised me to be a moderately polite person. But if a student says to me, this is how I see it as and you can fill in the blank,
Right.
A black person, a white person, a Jew, a trans person, a practicing Catholic, I always say, well, that's interesting, but it really doesn't carry any extra weight that you're coming from the particular perspective you are. Your view has to be subjected to the very same scrutiny and interrogation as everybody else's view. So you don't get extra bonus points because you're coming from a particular vantage point, even if it's the vantage point of a member of a group that historically has suffered, been on the losing end of one thing or another. I'm happy to listen to the complaint, but the complaint needs to be put under the microscope of reason and subjected to the same reflective scrutiny as everybody else's view.
Well, unfortunately, increasingly, you're not going to get that reciprocity. And the response to the statement you just made was to shriek at you the way that your colleague Christakis got shrieked at by a Yale undergrad, a residential college head that he was, over a memo about Halloween costumes. For goodness sakes, there's something that's unbelievably problematic. And to me, the statement you just made, that it has to be made in places like Yale, is an incredible indictment of higher education. That's something that should be that is at grade school level understanding needs to be made to Ivy League undergraduates, because the emotion is the basis of their morality, and they just won't have anything else.
Yeah. Well, I would say two things in response to that. First, there is something, in my own view, so elementary about the position that I just described a couple of minutes ago that it does seem odd that it has to be re-articulated and defended in the upper reaches of the realm of higher education. There's something a little strange about that. And of course, the response from some quarters may be anger, outrage, loud complaints. But I think that those of us who feel the way I do need to just calmly stand our ground and do the best we can to respond in a level-headed, diplomatic, but firm way in defense of this very simple-minded, elemental position that I've described. What alternative is there?
No,
you can't shriek back.
No,
that just feeds the victory to the other side. So we have to be calm and keep our wits and explain in simple, logical terms what it is we're after and why we think it touches on the very heart of the educational enterprise.
What about your colleagues? Your colleagues in the professorate? There's been a lot of left-leaning professors in the last half a dozen years who've been mugged by the reality of the college campus culture. I think of Brett Weinstein at Evergreen State. I think of Jonathan Haidt, and there are many others. And they're providing through heterodox, and they're providing other alternatives. They're trying to it seems like provide alternative instruction, but also perhaps wave a red flag to their colleagues. And I wonder how many colleagues of yours do you get the sense of that are also maybe sympathetic to the left position, who are similarly concerned with this culture the way that you are and the other gentleman I mentioned?
Right. Well, I haven't taken a head count yet,
No, but I mean, you
but
get a sense of if people are
sure,
starting to be concerned about it or not.
sure. I think actually there are a fair number. How many, time will tell, who are among my colleagues who are, broadly speaking, liberal or progressive in their political views. They vote Democratic. They are, blue state thinkers in their outlook in general when it comes to politics, but who, as academics, as teachers and scholars, are increasingly concerned about the changes in the academic culture that we've been talking about, and who are, when it comes to college life, to life on campus, are more conservative in their view. And they'd like to be a little more conservative there and hold on to their liberal scruples in politics as well. That kind of describes me, too. I think I've voted for every Democratic candidate for president since I could pull the lever. And somewhere in the middle of the Democratic Party, to the extent the middle still exists. But when it comes to academic policies and the culture of higher education, I find myself moving in an increasingly conservative direction, at least as measured by current opinion on campus. And I think that combination of views, liberal in politics, conservative with respect to the academy, that's a position that describes an increasingly large number of my colleagues at Yale and elsewhere. So the book, when I wrote the book, I was hoping to give some cover to those who feel as I do, and maybe a little extra leeway to come out into the open and speak their minds.
I'm glad you did. I got one more question for you, though. Since you're 40 years at Yale, again, I mean, that's just such a wealth of institutional knowledge, and being, at the scene of a lot of cultural changes. How do you think Bill Buckley would be treated by both the professors and the students today at Yale?
Well, there is a Buckley Center for, I don't know whether it's for free speech or public policy at Yale, which regularly invites speakers and puts on events students attend. It all goes off in the pretty normal academic course of things. And there are many students today at Yale who hold views which are shades of the Buckleyan worldview, if I can put it that way. We have plenty of conservative student groups, some much more conservative, strongly conservative than others, and they are not, shunned or despised or shut out from anything. But I do think that it would be ridiculous to deny that the prevailing culture on campus, the atmosphere, is one that discourages the open and confident expression of ideas of the kind that Bill Buckley expressed in his famous book many, many years ago, God and Man at Yale. So, that received a somewhat critical reaction when it was published way back then, and things certainly haven't moved in the direction that would be more congenial to its reception today. I think if he came back to campus for a couple of days and gave a few talks, he would be amused in a way that he often was by phenomena that he found, rather puzzling and strange.
Yes.
He'd be amused, but he'd be in his own typical way happy to talk and take on challengers, and it would be quite a fascinating moment. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't. Anthony Kronman, Sterling Professor at Yale Law School, specializing in contracts, bankruptcy, jurisprudence, social theory, and professional responsibility. He was also the Dean of Yale Law from 1994 to 2004. His book, which you got to pick up, The Assault on American Excellence. The Assault on American Excellence. Professor Kronman, thank you for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thanks for having me. Nice talking to you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.